Hello and welcome to another episode of the eReads podcast. I'm your host, Liz, and on this podcast, I talk about books, authorship, and just all the different parts of the creative journey. And today, I'm really excited because we're talking about learning, whether that's for your nonfiction research or whether you as the creative. We're talking about the power of learning with Gary Wietgrefe. And so before we jump into the episode, let me tell you about him. So Gary is an inventor with 6 patents, internationally published researcher, military intelligence veteran, economist, agriculturalist, systems developer, societal explorer, cyclist, hiker, outdoorsman, and author of 7 books. 3 books have been released in the last 3 years, including 2 in his Relating to Ancient series. After 40 days bicycling to North Pole, Alaska, Gary released his first travel adventure entitled Destination North Pole, 5,000 kilometer by bicycle. He and his wife Patricia live and travel from South Dakota. So now that you know all about the wonderful things that Gary does, let's have a quick ad before we jump into the episode. If you have a picky pup, I have the thing just for you. Nom Nom has 4 different recipes, and my pup Preston tried them all. And he could be really picky about the things that he likes, even though he can stand to lose a few pounds. But he loved all the different varieties in the meals, especially the turkey fare one. And I enjoyed him being able to eat something that was wholesome, and I can see the vegetables and the meat, so I knew exactly what he was getting in his meal. Nom Nom's food is full of fresh proteins your dog loves and the vitamins and nutrients they need to thrive. Fresh really means fresh, and with Nom Nom, you can see what your dog's eating. So how does Nom Nom work? First, you tell them about your pup, age, breed, weight, allergies, and protein preferences. They'll tailor a specific amount of individually packaged Nom Nom meals and send them straight to you. Store the meals in the freezer or fridge until it's mealtime. They'll give you specific instructions on how to transition your dog from foods like kibble to always fresh Nom Nom for best results. Watch your dog clean their dishes, dance for dinner, and overall thrive. Ready to make the switch to fresh? Order Nom Nom today. Go to the referral link in the episode show notes and get 50% off your first order plus free shipping. Plus, Nom Nom comes with a money-back guarantee. If your dog's tail isn't wagging within 30 days, Nom Nom will refund your first order. No fillers, no nonsense, just Nom Nom. So the referral link is zen.ai/eReadsPod1. That's zen.ai/eReadspod1. And enter offer code eReads. That's eReads. Welcome, Gary. I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you this morning?
Good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And so it's interesting to have you on because you have so many different things that you do. And so I'm interested to talk more about your books. You do a little bit of poetry and you talk a lot about culture and learning. So I'm interested in picking your brain about all of that today.
Great.
Fantastic. So Gary, before I jump in with the hard stuff, I have a question for you.
All right.
And so this I like to call like a bookish question. It's related to like books or writing. And I'm curious, when you are crafting your novels, crafting your books, do you write by hand or do you use like technology, like computer, tablet? Like how do you craft your stories?
Ooh, this is a good one because I'm of the age where I actually learned on a typewriter, but I wrote my first 4 books on yellow notepad. And the third, each of them I actually had typed up. The first couple were directories, and then a couple of agricultural books. And I yellow notepad, just scribbling down. And luckily, I had hired somebody that could actually read my writing. But since then, since floppy disks, I should say, I've been able to, I do everything on the computer because even when I was in the military, I wore headsets and actually used a manual typewriter to do Morse code. And so I could type fairly
Oh,
fast even on a manual. And so going to computer was fairly easy.
interesting. Like I have folks, friends of mine who they write by pen and paper. They feel like it helps them connect more with the story. Um, like you mentioned, my handwriting might get too sloppy. I might not remember what I wrote down. So I'm really grateful for autocorrect.
Right. Aren't we all?
Yeah. And so Gary, tell us a little bit about, how did you get started in writing and which book was your first book?
Actually, after I got out of the service, went to college, I worked for the South Dakota Department of Agriculture. And there I realized that we were to help producers and businesses promote and sell their products, but there was no directory of organizations that were helping producers. There were a lot of them, over 100 organizations, but we never really had a directory of who they were, where they're at, who's their members. And so I wrote that, and then that led into what are the products, and so I developed a directory of products for our state and which ones were available for international markets, that type of thing.
Interesting. And so from doing that, what was your first book? What kind of made you become an author?
It was an organizational directory, and again, I hadn't even thought of it being an author project until I come out with the second edition, and then the second edition of the marketing one. And that, I did that for 4 years and worked for the governor's office of economic development. And then I went into private business, and I kept getting questions about agriculture. And
Yeah.
so that developed into my second and third books, or it would be, yeah, second and third and fourth books, third and fourth books about the crop of millet, which uh, people may have heard of it recently
I was
because
gonna ask you, what's a millet?
2023 is the International Year of the Millets. And
Yeah.
so worldwide, it's an ancient grain that's being, in effect, reintroduced.
Okay. So okay, like you got my brain like firing. So it's interesting because you got, through kind of dabbling in work in all these different I don't know, they just kind of reminds me of like all these different puzzles, right? It's kind of spurred your kind of your journey. Um, is that also when you became passionate about culture and learning?
That's that's a good question. Actually, I developed, well. First of all, in the service, I was in military intelligence, so I was thinking a little bit different. And then as I went through business, I developed my patents, and I did international research with the University of Uludağ and Bursa, Turkey, a lot of it, and also the University of Agriculture in Mongolia. Uh, well, anyway, I
Interesting.
retired about
Mhm.
11 years ago now, and we traveled around the world. And I realized that there's so many different places of the world. Everybody tells me their culture and their learning is changing, but why is it changing? And so it became a mystery to me. And so I started uh, writing, trying to answer the question. And it ended up in a book, Culture and the Mysterious Agent Changing It. I think well, it's learning. It's it's really written as a mystery, and so what 20 of the 22 chapters start as a riddle, and so
Mm,
you try to figure out the riddles as
yeah.
you of changing culture.
And these books are mainly nonfiction. Is that correct?
They're strictly nonfiction, yes.
And it's interesting because even in crafting nonfiction, you started out with a question, and a lot of times when I talk to different fiction authors, they'll
Yes.
start by saying like this question, right? A question sparked a story, sparked a thought, and it's interesting to hear that that also helped you with your novels.
Yes, and I guess I have not written a novel per se, and I look at your different interviews, and you cover a very diverse audience of authors,
Thank
and so
you.
I thank you for that. And so I do fit a little bit different niche, which is great. Thank you for having me on. But yes, I do. often start with questions. And riddles have always intrigued me. And I even 30 years ago, I started my grandchildren on Aesop's fables and, trying to figure out the moral of the story. And so it's just kind of developed from there.
Hmm. How can like questions or riddles help us with culture and learning? How can that help us grow in those areas?
Well, I think it gets you thinking more deeply about um, what has changed. Since the
Mm,
beginning of time, we've had to food, water, shelter, clothing, and trying to raise our children to be self-sustaining. Because if they're not, culture doesn't survive. Okay, and so that what has changed that has affected those kind of things, and we've found that uh, our our work is moving more into um, basically fewer people are working because we're keeping younger people in school longer. And at the other end of the spectrum, we're having people retire earlier. And so, never in world history have so many lived so long off the efforts of so few. Is one of the things I came up with. Is just technology has changed to allow us to do that, but worldwide we've shrunk the working population and trying to get more effort like yours out of a narrower um, work age.
interesting. How, so where do you go from here, right? So you have these questions that spark the book. Is there a second edition? Like where do you go next? How do you find your next journey?
There's actually several in that series that I'm working on, and some other works. But the second book actually turned out to be learning as it influences the 21st century, and that is a much, I'll call it, heavier book. It's 400 and some pages, and it delves into um, how learning has changed over the centuries. And I like history, and so I did a lot of research and reading, especially the books of the late 1800s,
Hmm.
early 20th century. And in those, you have a lot more references to ancient. And then I've read a lot of other history books, and so I have references going back to Aristotle and, of course, Ben Franklin and some of those people, how they learned, because there's actual details about that. And then I compared it with modern learning. And then that's why the book is titled Learning as it Influences the 21st Century,
Mm.
because it does impact how we operate as a culture and how systems, uh, how, how people learn, not only at work, but at home and in culture, society.
It is, and I'm curious because your book is heavy on history and research. So the question that I wrote down was, when do you know when to stop the research, right? So like, how do you? You're just like, is
That's
it
a,
ongoing?
you, you, researchers never stop researching. Doesn't mean they always write everything in a public document, but it's the research and the reading that you do to provide more background. Just because my books are published doesn't mean that I stop learning and stop reading about those topics. And
Mm,
so, you know, one thing I did, and I mentioned I've been retired for 10 years. Well, I turned 65, and I'm going to transition here a little bit. You just can't keep mentally, when you retired or not retired, you can only do so much with the brain, and the brain needs a break once in a while. And so I asked my wife if she would do a long bicycle ride with me, and she said I would rather drive. And so we had a niece and nephew and three grandnieces up in North Pole, Alaska, and so I I flew back from Mexico, and a week later I was biking to North Pole, Alaska. And so at 65, I didn't know if I would make it, and I just took my old 10-year-old bike and biked up there. Well, it was a way of using my body, keep my body in shape, not only my mind in shape, on the thinking part. And so COVID shut us down, and I ended up writing a book about that, Destination North Pole, 5,000 kilometers by bicycle. So it's a completely different type of book, but it's a travel adventure, and I found it exciting writing that type of document.
Interesting. On so many levels. So, right. So, I think as writers, right, we often forget about the physical nature, right? Like a lot of what
Yes,
we do is sedentary. So, you
right.
have to, right? Whether that's like you are stuck, you have like a block, you just kind of like your body, whatever. Like, but movement is really essential. But you also took your personal journey and turned it into your next story. And that's amazing that you're able to kind of just find the story around you.
You nailed it. You nailed it, because all of us sit and we can be so absorbed in our chair and our desk and on our computer and searching and reading, and we forget that sometimes just step outside and walk around for a half hour, or 15 minutes, or an hour, hopefully. It opens your mind up and frees you to be more refreshed, I guess, both physically, and I think it's just natural enzymes or whatever it is in the body that reawakens your mind, and I think you're way more productive.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned like taking a break, and are working on poetry. And does poetry feel like a break from some of these heavier things? Kind of, how's this process been for you?
Unbelievable. I'm in a local writers group, and I'm also in a different local poetry group here in the Black Hills, and it's actually really fun. I get to listen to poets of a lot of different types of poets, and ages from the around 20 to 80, and it's just amazing uh, approaching poetry where you're really condensing a few words into a story of 100 words or less, or
Yeah.
30 words, and it focuses your your writing and your abilities into a very narrow funnel. Are you saying what you want to say? And it doesn't have to be a serious topic. It can be and usually they're very fun topics.
I was going to ask, as far as the topics, does any of your research kind of show up in the poetry in those short stories?
Even though I don't try, it does. It does. But my background is from farming and agriculture, and so I have different things about nature. For example, I just mentioned before we got online that we just got back from Mexico, and I had written a poem about migrating monarchs. And so the poem was about the monarch butterflies that come up from Mexico every year and come across our farm in northern South Dakota and on the way up to Canada. And so my wife and I were fortunate enough to visit the winter sanctuary where these monarchs winter in central Mexico. And so
Wow.
the day after that, I put a YouTube video together reading my poem with the videos of the monarch butterflies. And then the last minute transitioned into what we do on our farm to host monarchs as they migrate. So it's a 2.5 minute YouTube video using poetry, using my farm, and using the beauty of nature, seeing these butterflies floating around and flying. It's a cool little YouTube video.
Absolutely. Please send over the link so I can
Oh,
post that for
sure.
listeners. You are not just writing research, you are living it.
I love it.
Absolutely. Gary, before we end for today, please tell people, how can they connect with you? How can they find your books? What's the best method to learn more about you?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, in the interview, and yes, if my books are available on Amazon and all the standard places, but my website is relatingtoancients.com. Relatingtoancients.com, and so my patent availability and my books and things like that are available, and some of my audios recordings are on there on different topics. So relatingtoancients.com is probably the best way, but enter my name on Facebook, LinkedIn, ResearchGate. Uh, my international research is published on researchgate.com, and so them are the main ways people get to my information and get to me.
Love it. And Gary, if you had to leave any last words, maybe for someone who's like, they've been researching, passionate about research, and they're just like, no one's going to read this, or how do I condense all this down into a book? Any words of inspiration or support for them?
Yes, never stop, because uh, if you don't make it available to the public, you're right, they're not going to find it. But make it available to the public, whether it's in a short form, I don't care, it's a poet, a short form, or into a novel like you interview, or a nonfiction, but pamphlet. I did research in Mongolia and Turkey, and wrote some millet books back in the 89 and 90. I digitized those because they weren't digital. I digitized those in 2016. And now I have thousands of read around the world because they're available on ResearchGate in digital form that they can download for free. And so something that I wrote 30 some years ago is very, very pertinent today when people are trying to raise that particular crowd.
I love that. And it's also a reminder, one, if you don't publish, no one's going to read it.
Absolutely.
But also thinking about the form that best suits your work, right? Like you mentioned, whether that's a poem, a pamphlet, a book, really thinking about how do you making it digital, right? Like, so I love that encouragement just to keep going.
Liz, we have opportunities now that we didn't have in the past, and so I take my poetry, and most of the time you have to go to a poetry book, right, to get a poetry. Well, I decided I got a YouTube channel, so I'll just put a YouTube, a short poem on YouTube with the video, and it's a way of reaching a different type of audience, and I think far broader audience that are interested both in nature and in poetry.
I love it. I love it. Gary, thank you so much for your words of inspiration and reminding us to keep learning, right? To just
Please
not
do so.
stop.
Please
Yeah,
do so. Yeah.
absolutely. And so my final question for you is, I like to leave it with inspiration and just kind of just however people express themselves, right? So if you had to leave us with a word or phrase that we can use as a prompt when we are creating, what would you leave us with?
Change and always change. Do not just stick with what you know, because when you broaden out, you actually develop that particular topic far more, far more.
That. So, listeners, stay tuned to the end of this episode to see what I do with Gary's prompt change. I cannot wait. Again, thank you so much for stopping by. And I wish you so much wellness. Thank you, Gary.
Well, I really appreciate it, Liz. You have a great day.
Fluid, stagnant, infinite, mighty, change. It's an action, a thought, a state of being lasting past eternity. Our soul leaves and the body still transforms. Our energy gone, shifted into the beyond. Change. A beautifully complex thing that stagnation propels us toward. It is a choice we make with every lesson, question, or flicker of wonder. Change. A flicker that excites the brain and feeds curiosity through the ages. Spark the flame until it is a blaze. Let the blaze be an inferno that reaches everything and everyone in its path. Because one change can shift a lifetime. Positive change, negative change, changes for the better, changes for the worst. Challenge yourself to change. It may not be fluid, it may become stagnant, but it is infinite and always mighty.